I gave my grandson $25,000. A huge piece of my life savings to build a future for his first child. His thank you was to spend it all on a lavish party and then to my face, dismiss me as just the caterer. He thought the woman who built his life was just another line item on his party budget. But he forgot that a caterer knows how to cook the books, and I was about to serve him a final invoice that would bankrupt his pretty little fantasy in a puff of pink smoke. Before I begin, thank you for being here. For being part of this community. If you believe in the power of a woman knowing her own worth and demanding its value, you are in the right place. Please, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. It means the world to me. Now let me tell you what they did to me. My name is Hattie Mae Robinson, and at 70 years old I thought the only thing I had left to build was a legacy. For 40 years I was the heart and soul of Hattie's Home Style, a catering business that fed Atlanta's joy. I catered the weddings, the christenings, the repasts, and every family reunion in between. My hands, now gnarled with arthritis but still knowing, have seasoned the collard greens for mayors and rolled the biscuits for generations of church mothers. The business wasn't just a living. It was my ministry. It was built on pre-dawn mornings, on wrestling 50-pound sacks of self-rising flour, on standing for 16 hours over bubbling pots of gravy until the arches of my feet screamed in protest. That relentless, loving labor was the foundation of everything. Specifically, it was the foundation for my grandson Jamal. My only daughter passed when Jamal was just a boy, leaving me to raise him. From that day forward, every dollar I earned, every ounce of my energy was poured into his future. He was going to have the opportunities that were fenced off from me. He was brilliant, my Jamal, with a smile that could melt butter. He got a full scholarship to Morehouse, then went on to get his MBA from Emory. The pride I felt when he graduated, when he accepted a high-paying job in tech marketing, was so immense it could have seasoned every dish in Atlanta. 5 years ago I finally sold the business. The sale left me with a comfortable nest egg, enough to live on without worry. My home in Collier Heights is a testament to this life lived with purpose. It's a modest brick ranch, but it's paid for, and every corner holds a story. On the mantelpiece, amidst the family photos, Jamal in his cap and gown, my late daughter smiling with her father, sits my most prized possession, the Atlanta Small Business Champion Award from 1998. It's a simple plaque, but it's proof. It's the validation of my life's work. But I wasn't done building. My final project, my grandest cathedral, was the future of the great-grandchild I had just learned was on the way. The phone call that changed everything came on a Tuesday. Grandma. Jamal's voice, bright and full of the future. Brianna and I have the best news. I could hear Brianna, my granddaughter-in-law, in the background. Her voice was a high, sharp counterpoint to Jamal's smooth baritone. Brianna was ambitious. A lifestyle blogger, she called herself. Her life was a series of carefully staged photographs, her happiness measured in likes and shares. "We're pregnant, Grandma," he announced, and the joy that flooded my heart was pure and overwhelming. A new branch on our family tree. A new soul to feed. "Oh baby, that's the best news the good Lord could have sent," I said, my voice thick with tears. "I've got something for you. A little something to help you get started. A nest egg for my grandbaby." I told them about the money I had set aside. $25,000, transferred from my savings that very morning. It was a sum that represented countless pans of macaroni and cheese, thousands of fried chicken wings, an ocean of sweet tea. It was the cornerstone of my legacy. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy, thick with disbelief and then a dawning, manic excitement. It was the sound of a match being struck. I thought I was lighting a candle for the baby's future. I had no idea I was handing them the fuel for a bonfire. When Jamal and Brianna came over that following Sunday, the check was waiting for them on the mahogany dining table where I'd served Jamal countless Sunday dinners. I had cooked his favorites. Smothered pork chops, candied yams, and a 7-cheese macaroni so rich it was a sin. It was my way of saying, this is where you come from. This is real. Jamal walked in first, enveloping me in a hug that still felt like home. But then Brianna swept in behind him, a whirlwind of perfume and nervous energy. She was dressed in a cream-colored jumpsuit that probably cost more than my monthly light bill. She surveyed my living room with a tight smile, her eyes darting around as if assessing it for a blog post titled "Vintage Southern Clutter." "Mrs. Hattie, your house is so authentic," she said, the word hanging in the air like a backhanded compliment. We sat down to eat, and for a moment it was like old times. Jamal ate with the gusto of the boy I remembered, his praise for my cooking genuine and heartfelt. But Brianna picked at her food, pushing the yams around her plate. "It's delicious, of course," she said. "But so rich. My followers are really into clean eating right now." I ignored the sting. I was focused on the main event. After dinner, I cleared the plates and placed the small, sealed envelope in the center of the table. "Now," I said, my voice trembling with the weight of the moment. "This is for the baby. For their future. For their education. It's a foundation so my great-grandchild can stand tall." Jamal opened the envelope. His eyes widened, first at the number of zeros, then they lifted to meet mine, shining with unshed tears. He was speechless just for a second. In that second I saw my grandson, the little boy who used to sit on a stool in my kitchen stealing bits of dough. "Grandma," he whispered. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything, baby," I said, my heart swelling. "Love. That's all." But then Brianna leaned over his shoulder. Her perfectly manicured fingers, tipped in a shade of pale pink, plucked the check from his hand. She held it up to the light as if verifying its authenticity. A slow, calculating smile spread across her face. It was not the smile of a grateful mother-to-be. It was the smile of a CEO who had just secured a new round of funding. "Oh my God, Jamal," she breathed, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "This is it. This is the seed money." Seed money. The term felt cold, corporate. It wasn't the language of family, of legacy. "This changes everything," she continued, her eyes alight with a feverish gleam. "We can finally do the gender reveal party I've been storyboarding. The one with the drone footage and the custom smoke cannons. We can get a real videographer, not just my cousin with his iPhone. We can hire a professional planner. This could be the thing that takes my brand to the next level. We could get a sponsorship deal out of this." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. This wasn't about the baby. This wasn't about a foundation. This was about a performance. "Wait a minute," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "That money is for the baby's college fund. For a down payment on a house one day. It's not for a party." Jamal, who had been staring at the check with a dazed expression, finally looked up. He seemed to be caught in the gravitational pull of his wife's ambition. "But Grandma, this is for the baby in a way," he began, echoing her logic. "If we can grow Brianna's brand, it means more income for our family. It's an investment. An investment." They had taken the purest expression of my love, the culmination of 40 years of back-breaking labor, and turned it into a line item on a business plan. They were cashing in my legacy for a fleeting moment of online fame. The smothered pork chops sat heavy in my gut. The joy that had filled my home just moments before had evaporated, replaced by a chilling sense of dread. I looked at my grandson, at his handsome, eager face, and for the first time I saw a stranger. A man so blinded by the glitter of his new life that he could no longer see the woman whose love had built it. I had given them a foundation, and they were planning to grind it into dust for a puff of pink or blue smoke. The phone call came 2 weeks later. By then, the initial shock had settled into a low, simmering ache in my chest. I had tried to reason with myself, to believe in my grandson's good intentions. "Maybe I'm just old-fashioned," I told myself. "Maybe this is how young people build their futures now." But in the quiet of my home, surrounded by the tangible evidence of a life built on substance, the logic felt hollow. Love wasn't a brand. A child's future wasn't content. When the phone rang and I saw Jamal's name, my hand hesitated. I took a deep breath, praying for the right words, the right heart to guide him back. "Grandma," he said, his voice buzzing with an artificial energy I was starting to recognize as Brianna's influence. "Things are moving so fast. The party's going to be epic. We've booked the rooftop terrace at the West Side loft. It has the perfect view of the skyline for the drone shots." I sank into my favorite armchair, the worn velvet a small comfort. "Jamal, baby, have you really thought this through? $25,000 is a lot of money to spend on one afternoon." "It's not spending, Grandma, it's investing," he recited, the words clearly not his own. "Brianna has a whole deck prepared. We're talking major ROI in terms of engagement and brand synergy." Brand synergy. The words were alien in my mouth, tasteless. "I'm not talking about a brand, Jamal. I'm talking about your child. What about a crib? A car seat? What about saving for the lean times?" There was a pause. I heard the faint, sharp whisper of Brianna in the background. Then Jamal cleared his throat. We've got that covered, Grandma. We're going to get gifted a lot of that stuff once the baby registry goes live. Brianna says our followers are super generous. He said it with such confidence, such blind faith in the kindness of strangers on the internet, that it broke my heart. He was putting his faith in a fleeting digital community while dismissing the concrete lifelong support sitting right here in this house. Listen, he said, his tone shifting. The charm was back, the little boy sweetness that had always been my undoing. The real reason I'm calling is that we have a huge favor to ask. It would mean the world to us. The cold knot in my stomach tightened. I knew what was coming. The event planner is amazing, but she's quoting us a fortune for catering. And honestly, Grandma, nobody's food is as good as yours. It's so authentic. There was that word again. Authentic. A word they used to describe something they found quaint and a little bit backward, something to be consumed but not necessarily respected. We were thinking, he went on, the words rushing out now, that your contribution to the party could be the food. It would save us so much money and it would be such a personal touch. A little piece of our family history at the event. The audacity of it stole my breath. They had taken my gift of money, a gift meant to secure their child's future, and diverted it to fund a lavish spectacle for strangers. And now they were asking me to labor for free to feed that spectacle. They were asking me to pour my sweat and skill into the very event that was spitting on the intention of my sacrifice. It was a second mortgage on my love, and the interest rate was my dignity. Jamal, I said, my voice quiet, dangerously calm. I'm retired. My business is closed. I know, but you still cook for us all the time. It would just be on a slightly bigger scale. Maybe your famous shrimp and grits? And some of those little sweet potato biscuit sliders? Brianna said those would be very on-brand for her modern Southern belle aesthetic. On-brand. My mother's recipes, the food that had seen our family through hardship and celebration, reduced to a prop for his wife's online fantasy. I felt a deep, profound weariness settle into my bones. I was 70 years old. My back ached in the morning. My hands, once so strong and nimble, were stiff with arthritis. The thought of catering a party for 100 people, the shopping, the prep, the cooking, the serving, the cleanup, was exhausting. But then I thought of Jamal. My Jamal. Maybe if I did this, if I showed up and poured my love into the food, he would see. He would taste the shrimp and grits and remember the countless times I had made them for him after a bad day. He would see me, his grandmother, working in the kitchen, and the reality of my love would cut through the fog of Brianna's ambition. It was a foolish hope, I see that now. It was the desperate prayer of a woman in denial. I was trying to fight a forest fire with a glass of water. My silence was long. I could hear Brianna whispering urgently in the background again. Tell her we'll give her a shout-out on the blog, she hissed, just loud enough for me to hear. A shout-out. My payment would be a fleeting mention in a digital world I didn't understand and didn't respect. Please, Grandma, Jamal begged, his voice laced with that familiar, manipulative charm. We're in a bind. You'd be saving us. It wouldn't be the same without you. He was right, but not in the way he thought. It wouldn't be the same without me. Without my money and my labor, their grand spectacle wouldn't exist at all. I was the silent, uncredited executive producer of their entire show. With a sigh that felt like it was pulled from the deepest part of my soul, I gave the answer I always had. The answer that had defined my life as a mother and a grandmother. All right, Jamal, I said, the words tasting like ash. I'll do it. The relief in his voice was immediate and effusive. Oh, Grandma, thank you. You're the best. You're a lifesaver. After we hung up, I sat in my armchair for a long time, the silence of my quiet house pressing in on me. The hope I had been clinging to had withered. I wasn't going to this party as a beloved grandmother, a respected elder. I was going as a vendor. An unpaid, unappreciated vendor. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the price of admission would be far more than just the cost of ingredients. The day of the gender reveal party was a blur of motion and a special kind of hell. I was up at 4 a.m. just like in the old days, my kitchen transformed back into the headquarters of Hattie's homestyle. The familiar rhythm of chopping onions, of stirring a roux, of seasoning grits until they sang, should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like a betrayal of myself. Every chop of the knife, every stir of the spoon, was an act of complicity in my own erasure. My body, which had earned its retirement, protested loudly. My back was a column of fire. My knees, which had carried me through 40 years of 16-hour days, creaked and groaned with every step. I was fueled by coffee, painkillers, and a dwindling sense of duty. I had to rent a van to transport all the food and equipment. The chafing dishes, the serving platters, the cambros to keep the food hot. They were ghosts from my past life, relics of a career I had proudly concluded. Now they felt like the tools of my humiliation. I loaded the van myself, grunting with the effort, the weight of the steel a physical manifestation of the heaviness in my heart. Arriving at the west side loft was like entering another world. The rooftop terrace was a sea of pastel pink and blue balloons, oversized floral arrangements and white linen. A DJ was already set up, playing music that was just a repetitive, soulless beat. Young people in expensive, trendy clothes milled about holding champagne flutes and taking selfies. It was a scene of performative joy, a party not for celebrating a new life, but for creating content. Jamal and Brianna greeted me at the service elevator, their smiles wide and brittle. Brianna was wearing a flowing white dress, her hand perpetually resting on her small baby bump as if posing for a magazine cover. "Grandma, you made it," Jamal said, giving me a quick one-armed hug before immediately turning to direct the hired servers. "Mrs. Hattie, thank you so much for doing this," Brianna said, her eyes scanning my setup with a critical gaze. "The event planner needs you to set up over there behind that partition. We need to keep the main area clear for the drone." Behind a partition. I was being hidden. My food was welcome, but my presence, my reality as an old woman in sensible shoes and an apron, was not part of their aesthetic. I was the help. I spent the next hour in my designated corner, a culinary ghost at the feast I had funded and prepared. I arranged the shrimp and grits in the chafing dish, the creamy, savory aroma a stark contrast to the sterile, perfume-heavy air of the party. I laid out the sweet potato biscuit sliders, their vibrant orange a splash of real color in a world of pale pink and baby blue. I set out the pimento cheese crostini and the deviled eggs, each one a small testament to a lifetime of skill. It was a beautiful spread, a table laden with love and history. But from behind my partition, I watched as guests descended upon it like locusts, piling their plates high without a single glance in my direction. The party wore on. The music got louder. The laughter sounded more forced. I stood on my aching feet, replenishing the platters, my heart a dull, throbbing ache that was worse than the pain in my knees. I watched my grandson, my Jamal, work the room. He was a natural, his smile easy, his charm effortless. He and Brianna moved through the crowd like celebrities, posing for photos, their arms wrapped around each other in a perfect pantomime of love. They never once came behind the partition to check on me, to offer me a glass of water, to thank me. I was invisible. Then came the main event. The DJ announced it was time for the big reveal. The crowd gathered around a large white cannon positioned at the edge of the rooftop. The energy was high, a palpable buzz of anticipation. The videographer was in place. The drone hovered overhead like a mechanical vulture. This was the moment they had paid for with my legacy. Just before the countdown began, a woman with bright purple hair and a popular fashion blog I recognized from Brianna's conversations cornered Jamal near my station. She was holding one of my biscuit sliders, her eyes wide with pleasure. "Oh my God, Jamal, this food is divine," she gushed. "These little biscuit things are to die for. Who is your amazing caterer? I have to get their card for my next event." This was it. The moment of truth. My heart seized in my chest. This was his chance. His chance to say, "That's my grandmother, Hattie Mae Robinson. She's the best cook in Atlanta. All of this is from her." It was his chance to honor me, to acknowledge me, to pull me out from behind the partition and into the light. I saw the flicker of panic in his eyes. He was trapped. On one side was the truth, his history, the woman who had raised him. On the other was the image he and Brianna had so carefully crafted, modern, sophisticated, and free of any country baggage. He looked at the influential blogger, then his eyes darted for a split second in my direction, a fleeting, guilty glance. He saw me standing there in my apron, tired and worn. And he made his choice. He gave a small, dismissive wave in my general direction, not even making eye contact. "Oh," he said, his voice casual, airy, as if swatting away a fly. "That's just the caterer." The caterer. The word struck me with the force of a physical blow. The air went out of my lungs. The rooftop with its chatter and music went silent. In that single monstrous phrase he had erased me. He had taken my identity as his grandmother, the matriarch of his family, the very foundation of his life, and discarded it like a used napkin. I wasn't family. I wasn't love. I was a service provider. An anonymous, interchangeable worker. Just the caterer. The DJ started the countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. A deafening boom echoed across the rooftop, and a massive cloud of pink smoke erupted from the cannon, billowing into the clear Atlanta sky. The crowd roared with delight. Pink smoke. It was a girl. Jamal and Brianna embraced in a long dramatic kiss for the cameras. People cheered, champagne corks popped, and in my little corner behind the partition my world, which had been slowly cracking, finally shattered into a million pieces. The pink smoke, the color of a baby girl, of innocence and new beginnings, was the bitter, choking backdrop to the death of the love I had for my grandson. It was the color of my heartbreak. The party wound down in a flurry of air kisses and promises to collab. I remained in my corner, a statue carved from grief. The pink smoke had dissipated into the twilight, but its acrid smell still clung to the air, a scent I would associate with betrayal for the rest of my days. My job was not yet done. The caterer, as I now knew myself to be, had to clean up. As I began the slow, heavy work of packing my equipment, my hands trembled. I scraped untouched shrimp and grits, food that was good enough to be eaten but not good enough to be acknowledged, into a trash bag. Each scrape of the serving spoon against the pan was a fresh wave of humiliation. I was a ghost haunting the scene of my own murder. The murder of my identity, my role, my place in my own family. It was then that a young woman approached my station. She was one of the servers, dressed in the standard black uniform. She had kind eyes and a quiet competence about her. Throughout the party, she had been the only one to offer me a bottle of water, the only one to meet my gaze with something other than indifference. "Excuse me," she said softly. "You're Hattie Mae Robinson, aren't you? From Hattie's Home Style." I was so startled to be addressed by my own name that I could only nod, my throat tight with unshed tears. "I thought so," she said, a small, respectful smile on her face. Her name was Imani. "My mother is Dolores Jackson. You catered her wedding back in '95. The First Baptist on Auburn Avenue." The memory surfaced through the fog of my pain. A beautiful, joyful wedding. A 5-tiered lemon pound cake with buttercream frosting. "Dolores," I whispered. "I remember. She was a beautiful bride." "She still talks about that cake," Imani said, her voice warm with the memory. "She says it was the best she ever tasted. My parents saved the top tier in their freezer for a year just like you told them to. You're a legend in our family, Mrs. Hattie. A real legend. A legend." In this place where I had been rendered invisible, this young woman, this stranger, saw me. She saw my history, my work, my worth. She spoke my name like it meant something. Her simple act of recognition, of bearing witness to my value, was a spark in the darkness of my despair. It was the kindest, most profound thing that had happened to me all day. And that spark ignited something deep within me. The profound, soul-crushing grief that had hollowed me out began to change. It cooled, hardened, and then sharpened into a diamond-hard point of anger. But it wasn't the hot, messy anger of a wounded grandmother. It was the cold, clear, righteous anger of a professional who had been cheated. Just the caterer. Jamal's words echoed in my mind, but they no longer sounded like an insult. They sounded like a job description. A contract. A legal designation. He had defined our relationship in that moment, and it was not one of family. It was one of business. And in business you don't get a shout-out. You get an invoice. The idea struck me with the force of a lightning bolt. It was so audacious, so perfect, so beautifully, poetically just. My mind, the same mind that could flawlessly time a meal for 200 guests, that could calculate food costs down to the penny, that had built a successful business from scratch, snapped into focus. The fog of sorrow lifted, replaced by a crystalline, methodical clarity. I was no longer a victim. I was a creditor. My hands, which had been trembling with hurt, were now steady. I looked at Imani, this angel of validation sent by the universe. "Imani," I said, my voice no longer the whisper of a wounded old woman, but the firm, resonant alto of a proprietor. "You're a student, aren't you?" "Yes, ma'am," she said, surprised by the shift in my tone. At Spelman. Studying business administration. Good, I said with a nod. I'm going to need a witness. And I'd like to hire you for 1 more hour of your time. As a consultant. I had a plan. A blueprint for a demolition. I would not scream or cry or plead. I would do what I had always done. I would work. I would calculate. I would build my case with the same meticulous care I had once used to build a 5-tiered wedding cake. And then I would present the bill. The bill for the food. The bill for the labor. The bill for the rental van and the chafing dishes. The bill for my time, my skill, my pain. It would be the most expensive meal they had ever eaten. I was Hattie Mae Robinson of Hattie's Home Style. And Hattie's Home Style always gets paid. The following Monday morning I did not call Jamal. I did not text him. I did not engage in the messy, emotional battlefield of a family dispute. Instead, I put on my Sunday best. A navy blue dress, sensible heels, and the string of pearls my late husband gave me on our 20th anniversary. I was not dressing as a grandmother. I was dressing as a client. My destination was a law office in downtown Atlanta. The firm was small, but its reputation was mighty. Singleton and Adebayo Financial Justice Advocates. I had found them after a long night of research, bypassing the big corporate firms. Their website had a tagline that spoke directly to my newly forged soul. Your work has value. We make sure it's recognized. I was shown into the office of a sharp, impeccably dressed black woman in her 40s named Aaliyah Adebayo. She had a no-nonsense air about her, but her eyes were kind. She listened, truly listened as I laid out my story. I did not present it as a tale of a grandmother's heartbreak. I presented it as a business transaction gone wrong. A clear case of breach of contract. I was contracted to provide catering services for an event. I began, my voice steady and professional. The fee for my services was to be waived in consideration of a prior financial gift. However, at the event, the client publicly negated our familial relationship, redefining me as a third-party vendor. As such, the original consideration is void, and payment for services rendered is now due. I laid out the facts, the numbers, the timeline. I told her about the $25,000, the phone call, the party, and the final brutal dismissal. I even had a signed affidavit from my witness, Imani, testifying to the events and the quality of the service provided. When I finished, Ms. Adebayo leaned back in her leather chair, a slow, appreciative smile spreading across her face. There was no pity in her eyes. There was respect. There was recognition. She saw me not as a poor old woman, but as a savvy business owner with a legitimate grievance. Mrs. Robinson, she said, her voice rich with admiration, this is the most beautifully clear-cut case of quantum merit I have seen in my entire career. It means, as much as he has deserved. You provided a service with the expectation of, at the very least, respect and familial recognition. When that was withdrawn, they voided the unspoken contract. You are absolutely entitled to the fair market value of your labor. For the next hour we worked. We didn't talk about my feelings, we talked about numbers. We calculated the cost of ingredients, the rental fees for the van and equipment. We researched the going rate for a high-end caterer in Atlanta for an event of 100 guests. We factored in my 40 years of experience, my reputation, what the market would call the goodwill of the Hattie's Home Style brand. We added a premium for the last-minute nature of the booking. And then, at Ms. Adebayo's suggestion, we added a final, significant line item, consulting fee for event concept and financial enablement. That $25,000 wasn't a gift in the end, was it? She argued, a predatory gleam in her eye. It was the seed capital that enabled the entire venture. A venture capitalist would expect a return on that. So will we. The final document was a work of art. It was printed on crisp, heavy bond paper with the Hattie's Home Style logo at the top. A logo I hadn't used in 5 years. It was a formal, itemized invoice. It detailed everything from the cost of the shrimp to the hours I spent scrubbing pots. The grand total was $27,500. Looking at the number, a tremor of fear ran through me. It was so much. It was so aggressive. But then I heard Jamal's voice in my head, just the caterer. And my fear was replaced by a profound sense of rightness. This was not a punishment. It was a valuation. It was the price tag for my time, my labor, my skill, and my dignity. Send it, I said to Ms. Adebayo, my voice firm. Certified mail. Signature required. The invoice was sent on a Tuesday. The tracking information showed it was delivered to the trendy West Side loft on Thursday afternoon. I imagined the scene with a cinematic clarity. The mail carrier handing the stiff envelope to Brianna, her annoyance at having to sign for something, the way her face would shift from confusion to pure, unadulterated horror as she read the itemized list of my worth. For 2 days there was only silence. The heavy, charged silence that precedes a storm. I spent the time in a state of calm anticipation. I baked a lemon pound cake just for myself. I attended my Bible study. I was preparing my soul for the battle I knew was coming. The call came on Saturday evening. The name on the caller ID was Jamal. I let it ring 4 times, took a slow, deep breath and answered, my voice perfectly level. "Hello, Jamal." "Grandma," he shrieked, his voice a raw, hysterical torrent of disbelief and rage. "What is this? What in God's name is this? We got a bill. From a lawyer. For $27,000. Are you suing us? Is this a joke?" I held the phone slightly away from my ear, letting the initial wave of his fury wash over me. It was the sound of a man whose carefully constructed world had just been hit by a wrecking ball. It was the sound of fear. When he finally paused to take a breath, I spoke, my voice a calm, serene island in the ocean of his hysteria. "No, Jamal," I said quietly. "I'm not suing you. I am billing you." "Billing me?" he sputtered. "For what?" "For being a grandmother." "No," I corrected him gently but with a spine of steel. "I am billing you for being a caterer. You defined the terms of our relationship at the party. I am simply acting accordingly. A caterer provides a service. And a caterer gets paid." There was a stunned silence. I could hear him breathing ragged and fast. I had taken his narrative, the one where he and Brianna were the savvy entrepreneurs and I was the quaint, exploitable relative, and I had flipped it on its head. I had used the language of his world, the world of invoices and bottom lines, to expose the truth of mine. "Grandma, you can't be serious," he finally whispered, his anger collapsing into a pathetic confusion. "This is insane. We don't have this kind of money. You'll ruin us." "The state of your finances is your concern, not mine," I replied, my voice devoid of sympathy. "My only concern is the debt that is owed. You see, a gift is given freely and accepted with gratitude. When the gratitude is absent and the gift is insulted, it is no longer a gift. It becomes a transaction. And this transaction is now complete. All that remains is the settlement of the account." I could hear Brianna shouting in the background, her voice a sharp, venomous hiss. "This is extortion. I told you she was manipulative. Tell her we're not paying a dime." Jamal's voice returned, infused with a fresh dose of his wife's indignation. "We're not paying this, Grandma. It is not a request, Jamal. It is a legally sound claim," I stated, quoting Ms. Adebayo's exact words. "My lawyer, Ms. Adebayo, is prepared to file a suit in small claims court by the end of the week. I imagine your wife's followers and brand partners would be very interested to learn that she is being sued for non-payment by the very caterer whose food she featured at her party. It's not a good look, as Brianna would say. That was the kill shot. I had aimed my weapon directly at the most vulnerable part of them. Their image. Their brand. A messy, public lawsuit would be a permanent stain on their curated perfection." He was silent. The only sound was the frantic, whispered conversation between him and his wife. He had no defense. He had no leverage. He had built his party on my foundation, and I had just presented him with the bill for the materials and labor. "What do you want, Grandma?" he finally asked, his voice small and defeated. He sounded like a little boy again, but this time it did not stir my heart. "I want what is owed," I said. "From now on, all communication will go through my attorney. She will be expecting your lawyer's call." I did not wait for his reply. The woman he was trying to appeal to, the soft-hearted, endlessly forgiving grandmother, no longer existed. In her place was a creditor. A woman who knew her value. "I have to go now, Jamal," I said, my voice soft but final. "Goodbye." And with that I hung up the phone. I pressed the end call button and cut the toxic cord that had bound me to him. The storm had broken and I was still standing. The caterer had closed out the event. And the bill was coming due. The aftermath was not a dramatic courtroom battle. It was a quiet, swift, and brutal financial execution. Just as I knew they would, Jamal and Brianna capitulated. Their entire existence was built on a fragile scaffolding of public perception. A lawsuit, with its depositions and discoveries, would have exposed the rot at the core of their brand. The story of the hip, successful influencer and her tech-savvy husband exploiting their own grandmother would have been a social media firestorm they could not survive. They had no choice but to pay. Their lawyer, a man from a slick downtown firm whose retainer probably cost a fortune, contacted Ms. Adebayo's office the very next day. There was some initial blustering, some talk of familial obligation, and a misunderstanding. Ms. Adebayo, as she later recounted to me with a satisfied smile, shut it down with icy precision. She informed him that familial obligation does not include public humiliation and that the only misunderstanding was their belief that my labor was free. She made it clear that we were prepared to file the lawsuit by Friday at noon if the invoice was not settled. The negotiation, if you can call it that, was swift. They didn't have the money. The $25,000 I had given them was gone, paid out to the venue, the DJ, the balloon artist, the drone operator. The pink smoke had cleared to reveal they were not just broke but in debt. To pay my invoice they had to liquidate the only assets they had, their image. Brianna had to post a series of humiliating SpawnCon posts, selling cheap diet teas and fast fashion clothing she would never wear, alienating her aspirational followers. They sold the designer furniture they had bought on credit. Jamal had to sell his prized sports car, the one he so proudly displayed in his social media posts. The settlement was not just a financial transaction. It was a public dismantling of the facade they had worked so hard to build. It was a tangible consequence, a price they had to pay in the currency they valued most, their reputation. The check for $27,500, written from their lawyer's trust account, arrived at Ms. Adebayo's office 2 weeks later. When she called to tell me, I felt not a surge of triumph but a quiet, somber sense of justice. The money itself was secondary. What mattered was the acknowledgement, the valuation. They had been forced, by the power of the law and the strength of my resolve, to put a number on my worth. The first thing I did with the money was write a check to Imani, the young server from Spellman. I paid her for her time as a witness and then I added a significant bonus. In the memo line I wrote, "For services rendered in the restoration of dignity." The remaining money, nearly all of it, went exactly where it was always supposed to go. I went to the bank not with a heavy heart, but with a light and purposeful one. I met with a financial advisor and opened an ironclad, irrevocable trust fund. The beneficiary was my great-granddaughter, whose name I did not yet know. The trustees were myself and the bank. Jamal and Brianna would have no access to it, no control over it. This was her foundation, and this time, it would be built on solid rock, safe from the shifting sands of her parents' vanity. Months passed. The seasons changed. I received a birth announcement in the mail, a professionally designed card with a photo of a beautiful baby girl named Lila Rose. The photo was perfect, of course. The lighting was soft, the baby was swaddled in expensive linen, and Brianna was gazing at her with a look of beatific wonder that was surely practiced in a mirror. I felt a pang of love for the innocent child in the picture, but the connection to her parents was gone. The bridge had been burned not by my anger but by their disrespect. My silence was not a punishment. It was a boundary. It was the sound of my peace, a peace they were no longer welcome to disturb. One bright spring morning I took the trust fund's opening statement, the one showing the initial deposit of over $26,000, and I framed it. I hung it on the wall in my living room, right next to my Small Business Champion award from 1998. They were bookends, testaments to a life of work and worth. One was a public acknowledgement of my value. The other was a private, hard-won confirmation of it. My legacy, I realized in that moment, was not the ungrateful grandson I had raised. It was not the fleeting fame he and his wife chased. My legacy was in that frame. It was in the secure future of an innocent baby girl. It was in this quiet, paid-for house. It was in the profound, unshakable knowledge that a woman's work, whether it is raising a child, running a business, or simply loving her family, always has value. It is not negotiable. And sometimes when the world tries to tell you that you are just something, you have to be willing to stand up on your own 2 feet and hand them the bill. And that truth, that hard-won, beautiful truth, was worth more than any price. It was everything.